She never told him what she saw. She just made sure he lived. 30 seconds earlier, she'd watched a man slide something into a glass of Macallan 18. And Marin did the only thing a terrified waitress could do. She switched the glass. Marin Calloway pressed her back against the server station wall and gripped the edge of the counter so hard the thin, silver chain bracelet on her left wrist, the one with the tiny star charm she never took off, bit into the heel of her palm. Her heart was doing something ugly in her chest, not beating, hammering, like it wanted out. Because she'd seen it. 30 seconds ago, maybe 40, a man at the adjacent table had leaned across the white linen and slipped something into Dominic Voss's Macallan 18. Quick, practiced, a flick of the wrist disguised as adjusting the table setting, and then Victor Renault settled back into his chair like he'd done nothing more interesting than fix a crooked salt shaker. Victor Renault. She knew him. Not personally, God no, but the way a waitress knows a regular. He'd been coming to the Amber Room every Thursday for at least 6 months, always requesting the booth near Dominic's corner table, always ordering the Dover sole, always leaving exactly 18%. Pale gray eyes that looked like someone had drained the color out of them on purpose. Platinum blonde hair slicked back so tight it pulled at his temples. That black DuPont lighter he kept clicking open and shut, the metallic snap of it audible even over the jazz quartet. Marin's gray-green eyes darted to the dining room through the pass-through window. The Amber Room at the Drake Hotel. $200 a plate, minimum. Italian marble floors the color of heavy cream, brass fixtures polished until they burned under the sconce light, leather booths so deep you could disappear into them. She'd worked here 14 months, cleared $31,000 a year after taxes on an $11.50 hourly, plus whatever tips the Gold Coast clientele felt like leaving a woman who looked like her. She served this world. She did not belong in it. And now she was standing behind the bar with a poisoned glass of scotch hidden under a cocktail napkin on her tray, and she was trying to figure out what to do about it. Call the police. That was the rational thought, the one that surfaced first and sank fastest. And tell them what, exactly? That she, a waitress making less than minimum wage before tips, saw a well-dressed man do something subtle to a drink in a dimly lit restaurant. She had no proof, no camera angle, no toxicology kit tucked in her black half-apron next to her order pad. She had her word, and her word came wrapped in 230 pounds of woman that people in rooms like this looked straight through. Nobody would believe her. She knew that, the way she knew her own shoe size. So she'd done the only thing she could. She'd switched the glass. Now she watched through the pass-through as Dominic Voss lifted the clean tumbler, the one she'd poured fresh from the bar not 90 seconds before the switch, and brought it to his lips. Slow, unhurried. The way a man drinks when he's never had to rush anything in his life. The amber liquid caught the warm light and he swallowed, and he set the glass down on the table with a soft click. And he was fine. He was fine. Marin's knees almost buckled. She caught herself on the counter, her soft arms bracing, the black polyester of her fitted server blouse pulling tight across her generous bust as she exhaled a breath that felt like it had been locked in her lungs for a full minute. Her honey blonde hair, pulled back in its usual low, messy ponytail, had come loose around her face, flyaway strands sticking to the warm flush spreading across her rounded cheeks, across the pale freckles scattered over the bridge of her small, upturned nose. She grabbed the poisoned glass from under the napkin. Her hands were shaking so badly the crystal clinked against the stainless steel sink basin. Once, twice, a sound like a tiny alarm nobody heard. She turned the water on full blast and watched the scotch spiral down the drain, then scrubbed the glass with the hottest water she could stand until her fingers were red. Done. Gone. No proof, no evidence. Just a man who was alive because a fat waitress knew how to swap a rocks glass without being noticed. The dining room pulled her back. She had Dominic's check ready. $347 for a 16-ounce Wagyu ribeye, 2 pours of Macallan 18, and a side of charred broccolini. She crossed the floor on her scuffed black non-slip shoes, her posture doing what it always did. shoulders drawn inward, chin slightly down, trying to take up as little space as a woman her size could manage. She set the leather check presenter on the table, and her fingers betrayed her. They trembled, visibly. Against the dark leather there was nowhere to hide it. Dominic Voss looked up, those pale, ice-blue eyes, unsettlingly still. He didn't blink, didn't shift, didn't do any of the polite things people do when a server drops a check. He just watched her. The faint birthmark on the right side of his neck, shaped like a thumbprint just above his white spread collar, was visible where his Tom Ford suit jacket sat open. His heavy, brushed platinum Patek Philippe caught the light on his left wrist. He said nothing. Marin stammered something about hoping he enjoyed his meal. The words came out broken, half-swallowed. She retreated before he could respond. He watched her go. She felt it like heat on the back of her neck. 2 hours later, the shift ended, and Gerald Pike was waiting for her. The restaurant's general manager stood in the kitchen hallway with his puffed chest and his cheap navy polyester blazer and that chunky gold-plated class ring tapping against the doorframe like a metronome counting down to something rotten. His thinning, sandy gray comb-over caught the fluorescent light in a way that made his visible scalp line almost glow. His small, watery blue eyes found her the second she rounded the corner. 3 co-workers were within earshot. He didn't lower his voice. He never did. "Calloway, we got a complaint tonight. Customers said having you on the floor made their dining experience, and I'm quoting here, uncomfortable." He let the word hang. That bulbous, reddened nose wrinkled. "I've been patient. I've tried to make this work, but nobody wants to see that serving their $90 ribeye. You're a liability. You're too big for front of house, and honestly, you're too big for back of house, too." He said it like he was describing the weather. Marin stood there in her black server uniform, order pad still in her apron pocket, and felt every syllable land like a stone dropped into still water. Her gray-green eyes burned. She did not cry. She would not give him that. "Clean out your locker," Gerald said, already turning away. "And use the service entrance. Guests are still in the lobby." Guests. Not people. Guests. And she was not one of them. Marin walked through the kitchen without looking at anyone. She pulled her locker open, grabbed her jacket, balled her black half-apron in her fist, pushed through the service door, and stepped into the alley behind the Drake Hotel, where the rain was coming down in sheets and the dumpsters smelled like old grease, and nobody could see her face. She stood there for a long time, rain soaking through her uniform, the star charm on her bracelet catching a single drop of streetlight. She'd saved a man's life tonight. She'd spotted a poisoning attempt in real time, executed a flawless switch under pressure, and disposed of the evidence without a single person noticing. And then she'd been fired. Not for incompetence, not for the glass, not for anything she did wrong. Because a customer didn't want to look at her while they ate. $31,000 a year. 14 months of perfect performance. Gone because Gerald Pike decided her body was the problem. She walked home in the rain with her apron balled in her fist and the sound of his voice still ringing in her ears. 3 days later, Marin Calloway sat at her kitchen table in a studio apartment on North Sheridan Road that smelled like mildew and radiator dust, her laptop open to a screen full of polite professional rejections, the kind that start with, "We appreciate your interest," and end with absolutely nothing useful. Her honey blonde hair was pulled into its usual low, messy ponytail, flyaway strands catching the blue glow of the screen, and she was eating ramen straight out of the pot with a fork because doing dishes meant using hot water, and hot water meant a higher gas bill, and a higher gas bill meant she'd dip below $300 in checking. She had $312. Rent was due in 9 days. $780 she did not have. The rejection emails blurred together, but each one told its own little story if you knew how to read between the lines. She'd applied to 43 positions in the last 72 hours. Forensic accounting roles, compliance analyst openings, junior auditor spots at mid-tier firms. Every single one of them was a job she was overqualified for. And that's the part that twists the knife, right? Maren Calloway had graduated summa cum laude from DePaul University with a degree in forensic accounting, top of her class, the kind of student professors wrote personal recommendation letters for. She could trace a dollar through 14 shell companies and find where it landed before most accountants finished their morning coffee. None of it mattered. 14 months she'd spent applying before she took the waitressing job at the Amber Room. 14 months of submitting resumes that got callbacks, phone screens that went beautifully, and in-person interviews that ended the exact same way every single time. She'd walk into the room. The interviewer's eyes would do that thing, that quick flick down her body and back up, the polite smile thinning by exactly 2 millimeters, the energy shifting, the questions getting shorter, and then the follow-up email 3 days later, always some version of, "We've decided to go in a different direction." 14 months, 47 interviews, not one offer. She was 27 years old, 230 pounds, and $87,000 in student loan debt for a degree the professional world had decided didn't count because it came wrapped in a size 20 body. So she'd taken the server job, $31,000 a year plus tips to carry plates for people who looked through her like she was furniture. And now Gerald Pike, that red-nosed, class ring-tapping waste of a polyester blazer, had taken even that from her. The ramen was cold. She ate it anyway. Meanwhile, 11 miles south in a private office above a warehouse in Bridgeport, a very different kind of review was happening. Dominic Voss sat behind a desk made of reclaimed black walnut, his charcoal Tom Ford jacket draped over the chair back, his white spread-collar shirt unbuttoned at the throat. The Patek Philippe Nautilus on his left wrist caught the overhead light as he turned a cut crystal glass of Macallan 18 in slow circles on the desk. He wasn't drinking it. He was thinking. And when Dominic Voss was thinking, the room got very, very quiet. Frankie Malone stood to his left, as always, his broad, square jaw set, the edge of his worn brown leather wallet peeking from his breast pocket. He had a laptop open on a side table, security footage from the Amber Room paused on screen. The camera angle was overhead, slightly fish-eyed, grainy in the way budget restaurant surveillance always is, but it showed enough. 3 nights ago, someone had tried to kill Dominic Voss, not with a bullet. That would have been too obvious in a room full of witnesses, with a glass. Something slipped into his Macallan while his attention was on a business associate across the table. Quiet, elegant, almost impossible to trace. Almost. The footage showed Victor Renault approaching the table. Slim black Hugo Boss suit, platinum blonde hair slicked back tight, that matte black DuPont lighter clicking in his left hand like a nervous tick. Victor, one of Dominic's own lieutenants. The footage was grainy enough that you couldn't see the glass clearly, couldn't prove what his hands did in the 2 seconds he leaned across the table to shake someone's hand. But Dominic's people didn't need courtroom proof. They needed pattern recognition, and the pattern was damning. Victor Renault had been in contact with the Salerno family for months. The Salernos wanted Dominic's freight logistics network, a $1.2 billion operation running through the Port of Chicago, moving legitimate cargo alongside shipments that never appeared on any manifest. Victor had been feeding them routes, schedules, security rotations, selling out his own boss one encrypted message at a time. Dominic ordered the investigation kept quiet. No confrontation. Not yet. You don't rip out a weed until you've traced every route. But the footage caught something else, and this is the part that changed everything. The camera showed a server, honey blonde ponytail, black uniform straining slightly at the bust, a thin silver bracelet with a tiny star charm catching light on her left wrist. It showed her picking up Dominic's glass from the table, turning her back, pausing, and returning with a different glass entirely. Dominic watched it 3 times, the way her hands trembled, the way she kept her face neutral while her fingers shook, the way she set the fresh glass down without a word, without drawing attention, without asking for credit or recognition. She just did it and walked away. Frankie shifted his weight. Could be nothing, boss. Could have just been refilling. Those pale, ice blue eyes didn't move from the screen. That's not nothing, Dominic said. 5 words, flat, certain, the way he said everything that mattered. He had Frankie pull her employee file from the restaurant within the hour. Marin Calloway, 27, address on North Sheridan. And there it was, DePaul University, Bachelor of Science in Forensic Accounting, summa cum laude. A woman with the training to dismantle financial empires, making $31,000 a year carrying plates for a man like Gerald Pike. A woman who quietly, without hesitation, saved his life while barely making rent. Dominic set down his Macallan and said 5 words to Frankie without looking away from Marin's file. "Find her. Bring her here." The scene closes on his Patek Philippe watch as he turned his wrist to check the time. 11:47 p.m. The coffee shop on West Randolph smelled like burnt espresso and desperation. Marin sat in a wobbly wooden chair by the window, filling out a paper application for a bookkeeping position at a trucking company called Midwest Freight Solutions. $42,000 a year, no benefits, no dental, no vision. The kind of job that would keep her alive and nothing more. Her gray-green eyes moved across the form, previous employer, reason for leaving, and she left that box blank. What was she supposed to write? Fired on a banquet floor in front of 300 people because my boss wanted to humiliate the fat girl? She pressed the pen harder into the paper and kept going. That's when the black Rolls-Royce Cullinan pulled up outside the window. It didn't park. It arrived. The way a warship enters a harbor. Matte black, tinted windows so dark they looked like polished obsidian, chrome trim catching the streetlight. The door opened, and a man the size of a small building stepped out. Dark auburn hair, broad square jaw with a wide flat nose that had clearly been broken at least once. Deep brown eyes, steady and warm, despite everything else about him screaming danger. A charcoal suit, slightly rumpled, white open-collar shirt, and the edge of a worn brown leather wallet peeking from his inner breast pocket. Frankie Malone walked into the coffee shop like he owned it, and every single person inside went quiet. He found Marin in 3 seconds, walked straight to her table, pulled out the chair across from her and sat down, which was almost funny because the chair looked like doll furniture under him. His voice came out low, polite, almost gentle. "Miss Calloway, my name is Frankie. Mr. Voss would like to speak with you." Marin's blood turned to ice water. Her first thought, the only thought, was that they knew. They'd found out about the glass switch. They knew she'd seen the man slip something into Dominic Voss's Macallan, and now they wanted to know what else she saw, who she told, how much she knew. Her hand went to the thin, silver chain bracelet on her left wrist, the tiny star charm pressing into her pulse point. She almost bolted. Her thighs tensed against the chair. Her eyes darted to the door. Frankie read it instantly. He didn't move, didn't reach for her, just held up one broad palm like he was calming a spooked horse. He's not angry. He's grateful. 3 words that changed everything. The inside of the Rolls-Royce smelled like leather and something expensive she couldn't name. Cream leather seats, soft as butter. A built-in console between the rear seats held a crystal decanter of Macallan and 2 tumblers that probably cost more than her rent. Marin sat with her hands clasped in her lap, the star bracelet turning slowly on her wrist, and she was aware, painfully, brutally aware, that her thighs pressed wide against the leather seats, spreading into the space, taking up room she didn't deserve. She hated herself for noticing. She hated herself more for caring. Frankie sat up front with the driver, giving her the entire back seat, and she still felt like she was too much for it. They drove north along Lakeshore Drive. The lake was black glass under a half moon. The building they pulled into had a lobby made of white marble and silence. A private elevator required a key card and a 6-digit code. 58 floors, $14 million of altitude. The penthouse opened like a wound. Floor-to-ceiling windows ran the entire east wall, and Lake Michigan stretched out beyond them like a dark country. The space was minimalist, cold, expensive, polished concrete floors, a single long sofa in charcoal wool, no photographs anywhere. Through an open closet door, she could see a row of Tom Ford suits hanging in precise intervals, charcoal and navy and black, each one probably worth more than that trucking company would have paid her in a month. A single crystal tumbler of Macallan sat on a black marble desk, the amber liquid catching light from a single overhead fixture. Dominic Voss stood at the window with his back to her. Then he turned. This was the first time she saw him in good light, up close, real. The dark espresso brown hair swept back with surgical precision, the sharp, angular jaw, the birthmark on the right side of his neck, just above his collar, shaped like a thumbprint, intimate and strange, like a secret left in plain sight. And those eyes, pale, ice blue, unsettlingly still. They landed on her and didn't move. He didn't greet her. He picked up a tablet from the desk, tapped it twice, and turned the screen toward her. Security footage. The banquet. She watched herself. The black server uniform, the honey blonde ponytail with its flyaway strands, the rounded cheeks flushed pink, reaching across a table to switch 2 glasses of whiskey. The footage was grainy but unmistakable. "You saw someone poison my drink," Dominic said. Not a question. "You switched the glasses. You didn't tell anyone." Marin's throat closed. I didn't think anyone would believe me. I had no proof. I was just a waitress." "You weren't just a waitress." His voice was flat, clinical, terrifying in its calm. "You were the only person in that room who saw what was happening and did something about it." He set the tablet down. The shallow dimple in his left cheek appeared for half a second. Not a smile, something sharper. "Forensic accounting," he said. "DePaul University, summa cum laude." She blinked. He'd already pulled her records. "I have a logistics operation, $1.2 billion across 14 states. Someone inside is bleeding me. $4.2 million missing in the last 8 months. My accountants can't find it. My analysts can't find it." He paused. "I think you can." But before the contract came out, he did something she didn't expect. He picked up a phone, spoke 2 words, and within minutes a full dinner appeared on the marble desk. Steak, medium rare, glistening with herb butter, roasted vegetables in a copper dish, a chocolate torte so dark and rich it looked like sin made edible. Marin stared at it, her stomach clenched with hunger and something older, shame. The reflex kicked in before she could stop it. She started to wave it off, started to say she wasn't hungry, the same lie she'd told 1,000 times in front of people who made her feel like eating was a confession. Dominic sat down across from her. He poured her a glass of wine. He picked up his own fork. "Eat," he said. "You're going to need the energy." So she did. She cut into the steak and took the first bite, and it was the best thing she'd tasted in years, and Dominic watched her with something between intensity and satisfaction. His ice-blue eyes never dropped to her body with disgust. They dropped to her body with open, unhidden want. Like her soft arms and full figure and flushed, rounded cheeks were exactly what he'd been looking for, and he'd finally found it. When the plates were cleared, Dominic slid a single sheet of paper across the desk. An employment contract. Her eyes found the salary line and stopped. $285,000 per year. Marin's gray-green eyes went wide. Her lips parted. The star bracelet caught the light on her wrist. Dominic leaned back, the heavy, brushed platinum Patek Philippe gleaming at his wrist. "You saved my life with a glass of whiskey. Now save my empire with that brain." She picked up the pen. Monday morning, 7:45 a.m. Marin Calloway walks through the steel doors of the Freight Operations Center on South Halsted Street, and every single head in the room turns. The space is a converted warehouse, massive, open, industrial bones exposed beneath banks of flat-screen monitors showing live port feeds, shipping routes, container tracking grids. Fluorescent light bars hum overhead. Long metal desks arranged in rows hold laptops, encrypted radios, stacked manifests. Armed men in dark suits occupy every station, and the air smells like gun oil and burnt coffee and cold concrete. She is the only woman in the building, and she knows, she can read it on every face, that not a single person here thinks she belongs. Their eyes track her from the door to her assigned desk the way you'd watch a wrong delivery show up. Confused, irritated, a little amused. The new outfit helps. A little. Dominic had it delivered to her apartment that morning, a fitted charcoal blazer, silk ivory blouse, tailored black trousers, all in her exact size, all designer labels she'd never touched before in her life. The fabric feels like water against her skin, but the blazer still strains slightly across her wide hips when she walks. Her heavy thighs still brush together with every step between the desks. The silk blouse pulls just barely at the bust, and she can feel the old shame crawling up her spine like a vine, wrapping around each vertebra, whispering the same thing it's always whispered. You're too much. You take up too much space. Everyone can see it. The thin silver bracelet with the tiny star charm catches the fluorescent light on her left wrist. She touches it once, keeps walking. And then she meets Victor Renault. He's already there, leaning against a desk near the center of the room, one ankle crossed over the other, clicking a matte black DuPont lighter open and shut in his left hand. Click, shut. Click, shut. Platinum blonde hair slicked back tight, shaved at the temples, gel-heavy. Pale gray eyes, almost colorless, watching her from under his brow like a cat watching something it hasn't decided to kill yet. Slim black Hugo Boss suit buttoned to the throat. A faint birthmark on his left cheekbone catches the overhead light. He doesn't introduce himself. What he does is lean toward the man next to him, a broad-shouldered enforcer type, and say it loud enough for Marin and everyone within 15 feet to hear. Boss is thinking with the wrong head. Brought in a fat little accountant to play house. The enforcer smirks. Someone at a far desk coughs to cover a laugh. Marin's rounded cheeks flush hot pink. The freckles across her nose and cheekbones stand out like scattered sparks against the burn. Her gray-green eyes drop to the floor for exactly 1 second. 1 second. That's all she gives him. Then she sits down at her assigned station. 3 monitors, a secured laptop, a stack of shipping manifests 2 inches thick, and opens the books. Here's the thing about Marin Calloway that Victor Renault, in all his slicked-back, lighter-clicking arrogance, does not understand and will not understand until it's far too late. She doesn't fight with her mouth. She fights with numbers. And numbers don't care what size you wear. 40 minutes. That's how long it takes. 40 minutes of Marin cross-referencing 18 months of shipping invoices against port fee schedules and freight billing records. Her gray-green eyes scanning columns of data the way a concert pianist reads sheet music. Not line by line, but in patterns, in clusters, hearing the dissonance before she can name it. 40 minutes of her honey-blonde waves slowly falling out of her low, messy ponytail, fly-away strands framing her face. 40 minutes of her full, plump lips pressed together in concentration, her soft arms moving between keyboards, her thick fingers flying across spreadsheets with a speed that makes the man at the next desk stop pretending to work and just stare. She finds the first discrepancy at 8:26 a.m., a series of phantom container fees, 14 separate charges for 40-foot refrigerated containers routed through a shell company registered in Wilmington, Delaware, containers that were never loaded, ships that never docked, fees that were paid anyway, $340,000, gone like smoke through a crack in the wall. The room goes quiet, not all at once, in a wave. One man sees her screen, nudges the next, and the silence spreads outward from her desk like a ripple in black water. By end of day, she's mapped 14 shell companies, all of them traced back through layers of corporate registration to a single offshore account in the Caymans. 14 companies, 14 ghosts, all feeding one mouth. Someone brings her takeout around 7 p.m., Thai from a place on Archer Avenue, Pad CU, extra thick noodles, a side of spring rolls. She eats at her desk without pausing, without apology, without the old reflexive hunch of her shoulders that used to come whenever someone watched her put food in her mouth. She's too deep in it to care. The noodles go cold. She finishes them anyway. Her sleeves are rolled up to her elbows now, a pen clenched between her teeth, the star bracelet glinting every time she reaches for the mouse. She is in the zone, and the zone does not give a damn about Victor Renault's opinion. Then the pivot. It comes at 11:47 p.m., a small number on a routing form, a transfer fee that's 6 cents off from the standard rate. 6 cents. That's the thread. And when Marin pulls it, the whole thing unravels. It's not $4.2 million. The theft is $11.6 million, systematically siphoned over 2 years through a network so layered, so careful, that Dominic's entire team couldn't crack it in 8 months of trying. And the routing, every single dollar, leads directly to personal accounts controlled by Victor Renault, accounts that funnel straight to the Salerno family. What his men couldn't solve in 8 months, she solved before midnight. Marin pulls up the final transaction chain on her screen and says, voice barely a whisper, "It's not 4.2 million, it's 11.6 million, and it's going to the Salerno family through Victor Renault." She turns, and Dominic is standing directly behind her, close enough that she can smell his cologne, Tom Ford Oud Wood. His jaw is set like granite. "Show me everything," he says. Victor Renault doesn't know he's been found out, but he knows Marin is a threat, and he decides to remove her the way men like him always remove women they underestimate, by breaking her in public. The next morning, Dominic is off-site. A meeting across town, something about port logistics that couldn't wait. The operations center in the converted warehouse on West Kinsey feels different without him. Looser, noisier, the men moving with less precision, like dogs when the alpha leaves the yard. Marin notices. She always notices. She's at her workstation running secondary verification on the Renault transaction chains, her honey blonde waves pulled into that low, messy ponytail, flyaway strands catching the fluorescent light, the thin silver bracelet with the star charm clicking softly against the edge of her keyboard every time she types. She doesn't hear him coming. Victor materializes near the loading bay entrance like the bad idea he is. That slim black Hugo Boss suit buttoned to the throat, the matte black DuPont lighter already clicking open and shut in his left hand. Click, click, click. The birthmark on his left cheekbone catches the overhead light as he tilts his head, watching her from under his brow with those pale, almost colorless gray eyes. He waits until there are people around. Of course he does. 3 of Dominic's men are stacking inventory near the bay doors. A logistics coordinator is on the phone 15 feet away. Victor wants witnesses. Not because he's brave, because he's a coward who needs an audience to feel powerful. He stops 2 feet from Marin's chair. She looks up. Her gray-green eyes register him and her stomach drops, but she keeps her face still. "Morning, pig." Just like that. No preamble, no pretense. He says it the way you'd greet a stray that wandered into the wrong building. The logistics coordinator glances over, then looks away fast. The 3 men by the bay doors suddenly get very interested in their clipboards. Nobody intervenes. Nobody says a damn word. Victor leans against the shelf beside her workstation, clicking that lighter, and keeps going. Dominic's fat little pet project. That's what they call you, you know? Behind your back. To your face, I guess now, too. He smiles, and that thin gap between his front teeth makes it look like something cracked. "You're in over your head, sweetheart. Way, way over. You should waddle back to your little waitressing job before something happens that can't unhappen." Every word calculated, every word designed to shrink her back into the woman in the ill-fitting server uniform who hunched her shoulders and tried to disappear. Marin feels it working, the old shame crawling up through her chest like acid, her rounded cheeks flushing hot pink, her soft arms pressing instinctively against her sides as if she could compress herself into less space, less presence, less target. Then Victor escalates, because men like Victor always escalate. He steps closer. The DuPont lighter clicks shut and stays shut. His voice drops to something quieter, something meant only for her, though the silence in the warehouse means everyone hears it anyway. People who stick their noses where they don't belong end up in the lake. That's not a metaphor. That's geography. He pauses, lets it land. "I know you saw something at that restaurant. I know you've been digging, and I'm telling you right now, fat girls don't live long in this business." He flicks the lighter open again, the small flame dancing an inch from her face. "They're too slow to run." The flame reflects in her gray-green eyes, and something shifts. It's not dramatic. It's not a movie moment with swelling music. It's quieter than that, and harder. The shame is still there. God, it's still there. It lives in her bones at this point. But underneath it, something has calcified over the last 48 hours of staring at transaction chains and shell companies and $11.6 million in stolen money. Something cold and structural. Something that looks a lot like certainty. Marin looks at Victor Renault. She doesn't blink. She doesn't stammer. "I already sent the files." 4 words. Flat. Final. Victor's face goes white. Not gradually. Instantly, like someone pulled a plug and drained the blood straight out of him. The DuPont lighter stops clicking. His thin lips part and nothing comes out. For one beautiful, crystalline second, Victor Renault looks exactly like what he is, a man who just realized the woman he called a pig outsmarted him by 12 hours. He grabs for her arm. Marin pulls back. He gets physical, both hands on her shoulders, shoving her hard against a shelf of shipping crates. The impact drives the air out of her lungs. Her shoulder blade hits a metal edge, and pain spikes white through her vision. Crates rattle. Something falls. Marin's back slides down the shelf and she catches herself, one hand braced against the cold steel, the other pressed to her shoulder where she can already feel the bruise forming under her black blouse. But the files are on Dominic's secure server. Every transaction, every shell company, every cent of the $11.6 million routed to the Salerno family. Victor can shove her through a wall and it won't change a single digit. Frankie comes through the bay door at a dead run. The big man, 6 feet of retired linebacker build, dark auburn hair, that broad, broken nose, crosses the distance in 4 strides and gets Victor in a restraint hold that looks like it could snap the smaller man's collarbone. Victor thrashes once. Frankie tightens. Victor stops thrashing. Within minutes, the black Rolls-Royce pulls up outside. Dominic walks in. He sees Marin against the crates, holding her shoulder, her honey-blonde ponytail half undone, flyaway strands stuck to her flushed cheeks. He sees Victor pinned by Frankie, that Hugo Boss suit twisted at the collar. The look on Dominic's face is not anger. Anger would be human. This is something colder. Those pale, ice-blue eyes go absolutely flat, like lake water in January, like something that was never alive. The shallow dimple on his left cheek doesn't appear because he is not smiling. He will not be smiling for a while. The room goes dead silent. Every man in that warehouse stops breathing. Dominic doesn't say a word to Victor, doesn't look at him again. He walks straight to Marin. He bends down, slides one arm under her knees and the other behind her back, and lifts her off the ground, all 230 pounds of her, like she's made of air. No strain, no adjustment, no comment. His Patek Philippe Nautilus catches the light as his forearm flexes, and he pulls her against his chest, and she can smell Tom Ford oud wood and something metallic underneath it, and his heartbeat is perfectly steady. He carries her out of the warehouse to the Rolls-Royce waiting in the alley. She's shaking. He sets her in the back seat like she weighs nothing, crouches in front of her so those ice-blue eyes are level with her gray-green ones, and says, "You take up exactly the space you are meant to, and I will end anyone who makes you feel otherwise." He closes the door. She hears him walk back inside. She hears a muffled sound, then nothing. Marin sits in the leather silence of the Rolls-Royce, trembling, the star charm on her silver bracelet catching a sliver of alley light, and realizes 2 things simultaneously. She is not the person she was 2 weeks ago, and the most dangerous man in Chicago just carried her like she was the most precious thing he owned. The Salerno family hit back 48 hours later, not with bullets, not with car bombs, with paperwork. $3.2 billion in freight contracts, frozen. Every single one. Dominic's legitimate front companies, the shipping lanes, the port leases, the warehouse contracts that laundered revenue through 14 shell corporations across 3 states, all of it locked behind a corrupted federal Port Authority hold order signed by a clerk nobody had ever heard of. The Salernos didn't need to kill Dominic Voss, they just needed to choke him. Strangle the cash flow, collapse the infrastructure, let the empire eat itself from the inside in 72 hours. And it was working. His lawyers were on the phone screaming. His accountants were running projections that looked like obituaries. Frankie Malone stood in the penthouse study with his thick arms crossed over his rumpled charcoal suit, the edge of his worn brown leather wallet peeking from his breast pocket the way it always did, and for the first time in 7 years of standing behind Dominic Voss, he looked scared. Not of the money, of what Dominic would do without it. The Salernos assumed that with Victor Renault gone, that wiry little snake with his platinum hair and his clicking DuPont lighter neutralized in a warehouse nobody would ever find, they'd blinded Dominic, cut out his eyes and ears, left him stumbling. They assumed wrong. Marin Calloway had been studying the entire financial architecture of Dominic's operation for 6 days straight. Every freight manifest, every port contract, every shell company filing, every routing number and authorization code and customs clearance chain across the eastern seaboard. She'd mapped it the way other people read novels, absorbing the logic of it, seeing the grammar underneath the numbers, finding the syntax errors that everyone else skipped over because they didn't know what they were looking at. And she found it. One procedural error, a single misrouted authorization code buried in the freeze order, the kind of mistake a federal clerk makes when he's being paid $15,000 a month by the Salerno family to do something he doesn't fully understand. The clerk had copied the wrong jurisdictional reference number on the hold authorization. A thread. Tiny. Invisible to anyone who hadn't spent 6 days memorizing the entire tapestry. Marin could pull it. She stood at Dominic's desk in the penthouse study, and she was not the woman who had trembled switching his glass at the Drake Hotel, not even close. The wardrobe transformation was complete. A midnight navy Tom Ford sheath dress, custom tailored to her size 20 frame, structured shoulders that squared her silhouette into something architectural, a deep V neckline that framed her generous bust and revealed the small cluster of 3 freckles on her right collarbone. The dress hugged her wide hips without apology. It followed the thick curve of her waist and the soft weight of her full figure like it had been sculpted around her. Because it had. She had not lost a single pound. Not one. Her honey blonde hair was down for the first time, loose waves past her shoulders, no messy ponytail, no flyaway strands tucked nervously behind her ears. The thin silver bracelet with its tiny star charm caught light on her left wrist as she opened the laptop. She looked like a woman who had stopped trying to disappear, because she had. 6 hours. That's what it took. Marin reverse-engineered the freeze order using forensic document analysis, cross-referencing the authorization codes against the Federal Port Authority's own filing protocols she'd memorized from public records 3 days ago because she memorized everything, because that brain never stopped cataloging. She traced the corrupted authorization to a specific federal clerk named Dennis Hargrove, GS-12, working out of the Port of Newark, receiving $15,000 a month through a Salerno-linked LLC that didn't even bother hiding its payment trail. Sloppy. Arrogant. The kind of arrogance that assumes nobody's smart enough to look. Then she built the kill shot, a counterfiling that didn't just challenge the freeze, it exposed the fraud underneath it. She structured it so the filing automatically triggered a federal investigation into Hargrove, turning the Salerno's own weapon into a blade pointed back at their throats. And while their legal team scrambled to contain that fire, Marin simultaneously rerouted Dominic's contracts through 3 backup port authorities she'd identified in the shipping data: Norfolk, Savannah, and a small private terminal in Bayonne that nobody was watching because nobody thought it mattered. Marin thought it mattered. Marin thought everything mattered. Dominic watched her work. He didn't help, didn't interrupt, didn't pace. He sat in his leather chair in the corner of the study, one ankle crossed over his knee, a Macallan 18 in his hand catching amber light from the desk lamp. His pale, ice-blue eyes tracked her with the same unsettling stillness they always carried, that flat, predatory patience that made men twice his size look away first. The shallow dimple in his left cheek didn't appear. He wasn't smiling. He was watching her hands. The same hands that had trembled so badly she nearly dropped a rocks glass in front of 40 guests at the Drake. Now steady. Now flying across the keyboard with a precision that matched the clinical violence he understood. Her gray-green eyes scanned data streams without blinking. Her full, plump lips moved slightly, mouthing numbers under her breath. Freight tonnage, routing codes, filing deadlines. The silent language of a mind that saw the world in systems and could dismantle any one of them. He watched her body in that dress, the way she leaned forward and her soft curves pressed against the desk's edge, the flush of focus across her rounded cheeks, the way her shoulders were set back now, not hunched, not drawn inward, not apologizing. The hunger in his eyes was not disguised. He did not try. Marin hit enter. The 3.2 billion unfroze. Dominic's phone buzzed on the armrest. Confirmation from his port contacts, then his banks, then his lawyers. Everything moving again, the empire breathing. Frankie exhaled in the doorway like a man who'd been holding his breath for 6 hours straight. He looked at Marin with something that went past respect into reverence. Dominic set down the Macallan. He stood, walked to her with that slow, deliberate stride. Military straight spine, shoulders set wide, the brushed platinum Patek Philippe catching light on his left wrist. He took her face in both hands. His thumb traced her jawline, finding the faint beauty mark below her left ear like he'd mapped it long ago. "You are mine." Not a question, not a request, a declaration. She met his ice-blue eyes. Her gray-green gaze held steady. No stammer, no trembling. "I know," she said. He kissed her. His hands slid from her jaw to her waist, pulling her soft body against him. All of her, every curve, every pound, and she felt his fingers press into the fabric at her hips like he was making sure she was real. His mouth was warm and unhurried and certain. He kissed her like she was the answer to every question he'd ever had. She kissed him back like a woman who had finally stopped apologizing for existing. 3 weeks later, the Chicago Freight and Maritime Gala at the Ritz-Carlton Grand Ballroom. $2,000 a plate. Every power player in the city is there, and Marin Calloway walks in on Dominic Voss's arm. The gown is emerald. Floor-length Tom Ford, custom cut for her size 20 body. Structured waist that follows every curve of her thick frame without apology. Plunging back that exposes the soft, pale skin between her shoulder blades. The fabric draping over her wide hips and heavy thighs like it was poured there by someone who understood that architecture isn't about minimizing, it's about honoring the structure. Silver stilettos add 3 inches. Her honey blonde hair is down for the first time anyone in this room has ever seen. Sculpted loose waves falling past her shoulders, framing those flushed, rounded cheeks, those gray-green eyes that used to dart away from contact. The thin silver bracelet with the tiny star charm catches the chandelier light on her left wrist. She hasn't taken it off. She never will. Dominic is beside her in a black Tom Ford tuxedo, the Patek Philippe Nautilus gleaming on his left wrist, his hand resting on the small of her back. His fingers are spread wide, possessively, deliberately, across the emerald fabric, pressing into the soft curve of her lower spine. Those pale, ice-blue eyes scan the room once, cataloging, dismissing. His shallow left dimple doesn't appear. He's not smiling. He doesn't need to. She walks in and the room notices. Not politely, not gradually, the way a room notices a detonation. Conversations stall at the nearest tables first, then ripple outward. Heads turn. Champagne flutes pause halfway to lips. Because every single person in this ballroom has heard the story by now. The woman who unfroze $3.2 billion in 6 hours. The woman who dismantled the Salerno family's entire port network from a penthouse study with nothing but a laptop and a mind that moves faster than their whole operation combined. And there she is, 230 pounds of genius in emerald silk, taking up space. Gerald Pike is there. Of course he is. The man couldn't escape his own mediocrity with a head start and a map. He's managing a lesser restaurant now, a mid-tier steakhouse in the same hotel chain, 2 floors down from the ballroom, demoted after the Amber Room lost its Michelin consideration 6 weeks ago. Turns out Marin's forensic bookkeeping had been quietly keeping their finances clean for years. She'd been catching vendor fraud, reconciling phantom invoices, smoothing audit trails that would have sunk the place. Nobody noticed until she was gone. Then, everything she'd been silently holding together just fell apart. Funny how that works when you fire your most valuable employee because you don't like how she looks carrying a breadbasket. Gerald's watery blue eyes go wide when he sees her. His thick fingers find his chunky gold-plated class ring and twist it. The broken capillaries across his bulbous nose flush darker. He can't look away. He doesn't want to believe it, but his body knows. His body remembers the woman he called a liability, a cow, an embarrassment, and his body understands on some lizard brain level that she has become something he will never be. He approaches anyway, because men like Gerald Pike have never once in their lives had the good sense to stay down. "Marin, sweetheart, is that— Wow, look at you, I always said you had potential." She turns, slowly, the way someone turns when they have all the time in the world and the person speaking to them has none. "You fired me for being too fat to serve a $90 ribeye." Her voice is cold steel on marble. No stammer, no flush. Not a single nervous flicker in those gray-green eyes. "I just saved a $3.2 billion empire in 6 hours. Do the math." Gerald's mouth opens, closes. The class ring taps against his thigh once, twice. Dominic stands behind her. He says nothing. His hand hasn't moved from her back. That birthmark on the right side of his neck, the one shaped like a thumbprint just above his collar, is visible. His jaw is set. He doesn't need to speak. His presence is the threat. Gerald knows it. Everybody within 15 feet knows it. Gerald retreats. He actually backs away, like prey. Good. He should. Across the ballroom, conversations carry the rest of the story. The federal investigation Marin triggered has already resulted in 3 arrests. Salerno port contacts, gone. Their banking channels, severed. A certain platinum blonde operative with a DuPont lighter and a gap between his teeth, never mentioned by name, just handled. Dominic's empire is stronger than it was before the attack, tighter, cleaner, and every person in this room, from the shipping magnates to the aldermen to the union bosses sipping Macallan at the corner tables, they all know exactly why. It's because of the woman on his arm. Later, Marin stands alone at the bar. She orders a Macallan. Neat, because she likes it now. A woman beside her, thin, blonde, expensive in head-to-toe Valentino, looks her over. The way women in rooms like this look over women who don't match the template. "I'm sorry, I don't think we've met. Who are you with?" Marin lifts the glass, takes a slow sip. The star charm glints. "I'm the person who takes up space." She says it without shame. She says it like a title, like a territory claimed and held. The woman has no response. None. The final hour. The city glitters beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows. Lakeshore Drive, the dark mirror of Lake Michigan, a million points of light spread beneath them like something Marin used to think belonged to other people. Dominic is seated in a leather armchair near the glass. He reaches for her, both hands, and he pulls her onto his lap. All of her, every curve, every pound, the full, gorgeous weight of Marin Calloway settling against him like gravity finding its center. She lets him. His arms close around her thick waist. She can feel his heartbeat through the Tom Ford tuxedo, steady as a metronome. Nobody touches what is mine. Low, final, his breath warm against her ear. She traces the thumbprint-shaped birthmark on his neck with her fingertip. She never told him what she saw that night. Never explained the pattern she spotted in the Salerno data that made her realize the hit was coming before his own people did. She just made sure he lived. And now, she's running his world. Marin catches her own reflection in the ballroom window, a plus-size woman in Tom Ford, standing next to the most dangerous man in Chicago, with $3.2 billion in restored contracts and a federal investigation she personally triggered, burning the Salerno family to the ground. She doesn't look away from her reflection this time. She looks right at it. She takes up the whole frame. If you think you know someone's value by looking at them, you're not paying attention. You're just the next person she's going to prove wrong. Subscribe if you want to see what happens when the world stops underestimating the smartest person in the room.